Hello everyone and welcome back to another industry report. Well, my friends, today we are going on an adventure. Dead or Alive 6 has a hilariously expensive season pass, but that led me to a deeper dive into the insane minds of the people over at Koei Tecmo, the game's publisher. We see general incompetence and the differences in consumer behavior towards business models in the East and in the West, and how that really just, impacts the games. And it's kind of absurd, and I don't think I've had this much fun researching a video before, because when you go deep into the minds of Koei Tecmo, things just get a bit loopy. So yes, we are going to be talking about Dead or Alive Venus Vacation. And yeah, that means that writing this video in a way that won't get me hit with a big yellow marker has been a lot of fun. So this news all kicked off with the Season Pass for Dead or Alive 6 being announced. This Season Pass contains Happy Wedding Costumes Pack 1 and 2, Costumes Pack 1 and 2, 2 new characters and a bunch of debut costumes. And it costs $93. $93. Dead or Alive 6 itself costs $60. The Season Pass literally costs more than the darn game. And guess what's even more wild? It comes with the disclaimer that the Season Pass may not cover all content released during the Season 1 period. But of course, don't worry, it actually gets worse. Season passes typically would cover a year of game content. The idea would be you'd purchase the Season Pass and then you would get all of the DLC in one package, usually at a bit of a discount. Well, since that, we've seen the rise of the Battle Pass, a sort of paid-for reward structure for free-to-play titles like Fortnite and Apex, usually being priced at around £10. Unlike regular season passes, though, they would only last for maybe a quarter of a year. Well, the utter madmen at Koei Tecmo, they have done it. This $93 Season Pass covers a quarter of a year. So if it was to continue all year long, it would be $60 for the base game plus $372 for a year of season passes. And this game is almost certainly going to be going on for more than a single year, which means, yes, this whole thing is utterly wild. Things, though, begin to make more sense when we look through the rest of Koei Tecmo's roster of games. Dead or Alive 5 has £997 of downloadable content. Now, there is a $29.99 bundle, but that only includes about half of the DLC, so almost £1,000. And that's not even coming close to the utter king of microtransactions, though. The only game that has more lusty appeal than the Dead or Alive franchise, and that is Train Simulator 2019, with its over £5,000 of downloadable content. This trend, though, does continue when we look through the Koei Tecmo stuff. We've got Warriors Orochi 4, £169 in DLC, Attack on Titan 2, £128, Dynasty Warriors 9, £467 of DLC. Most of these are costume and weapon packs. And admittedly, it all does seem to be quite niche, really designed towards these sort of compulsive whale-like purchasers. Now, of course, there's something blindingly obvious with the Dead or Alive franchise, in particular, that's very important here, because as much as giving Lu Bu a new coat, as much as that's cool, in Dead or Alive, let's just say that the costumes are somewhat more targeted towards the more primal tastes of the human race. This likely does give those things a higher conversion rate, even though I still imagine a lower percentage, or a low percentage in general, of players are actually going to be interested in those costume packs. Now the thing is, Dead or Alive, it gets memed on really hard, but it's actually a really quite solid series of fighting games. Dead or Alive 6, rather interestingly, attempted to pitch itself as being a bit toned down, as compared to prior incarnations of the mainline fighting games in that franchise. And the critical response has been quite interesting. The Kotaku review actually makes it seem really interesting, praising both its fighting mechanics, the flow of gameplay, and its narrative mode. From their review, it seems like a genuinely great game, and broadly critics do agree that it's very good, having a 79 rating on OpenCritic. Of course, some reviewers have been stricken with the affliction of all-encompassing temporary madness, with the Eurogamer review going on a barely coherent rant about the President of America and his daughter, which, I don't think is really has much to do with Dead or Alive 6, and does bring me on to a very interesting topic about, well, audience versus reviewer. But anyhow, it seems like a solid game, but with a terrible business model. And it all seems absurd, as if an alien came to Earth and created it. But here's the thing, it's Koei Tecmo, right? So Koei Tecmo are a Japanese video game holding company that are, well, they rather famously don't get the West. They have bizarre YouTube policies with those like copyright symbols and watermarks, and generally they do seem quite out of touch. Now, the Japanese market is very different to the Western one, And a lot of this stuff makes more sense when you look at the Japanese market. And with that, we've got to talk about gacha games. So these are named after those things. You basically put money into a thing, you get a little capsule that contains a random toy. Now, in video game form, these gacha games are probably the most downright evil version of free-to-play on Earth, and they are particularly massive in Japan, with games like Fate Grand Order earning insane amounts of money. I mean, FGO, Fate Grand Order, had revenue of $1.8 billion in fiscal year 2018, mostly in Japan. Now, these games typically work by you opening sort of, packs of varying qualities, and you can usually increase the quality of that by just buying more packs, buying more premium ones, or you can sort of pump up in some games how well an actual capsule will do in terms of its rewards. And really, it does work quite well with the sunk cost fallacy. It really integrates that into the monetization loop in a deep way, having these games really actually have quite a high ratio of whales who spend a rather massive amount of money on them. Well, for Koei Tecmo, they have their own entry to this genre, Dead or Alive Venus Vacation. Technically, it's a progression of the Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball series of games. Now, they're all about big physics and a free camera and watching your characters do things. There's management gameplay, I believe, there's volleyball, of course, and then there are some mini games. And to put it rather simply, much of the gameplay is actually watching your characters doing things. And that does somewhat mean that the costumes kind of are the gameplay. Now, you get these costumes through the gacha game monetization system that involves pumping all sorts of gems and tokens and things into the little capsules that, contain your costumes. Now, there's also seasonal events that come with their own costumes, often having bonuses for wearing those costumes in season. So this game makes a pretty massive amount of money for Koei Tecmo. They know that for certain games, depending on the theme, costumes can make a disproportionately large amount of money. Now, fighting games themselves already pretty heavily rely on costume packs for monetization, and indeed the setup of fighting games does make it quite hard to monetize them in a decent way, which is why fighting game monetization has been really quite annoying for many years. Well, the combination of Dead or Alive's theme and the publisher's success with selling costumes elsewhere kind of results in this system, which, it does feel slightly alien. And this franchise has always been a bit of a strange mashup, and I think the EVO Japan incident really highlights this. So the game's producer and director basically paused the game when characters were in a pretty suggestive position, and then they had great fun angling the game's free camera to better show it, let's just say. Now, this led to the stream being pulled down and EVO issuing an apology. Now, here's the thing that I'll say. Without passing any judgment on any of this, what it does sort of do is highlight how Dead or Alive, while it is another fighting game franchise, and actually quite a good one it seems, it does have another element to it, at least in the eyes of the people behind the game. And we all know that that element is going to have a higher conversion rate with things like costume packs. That is not to make any excuses for a $93 season pass that lasts 3 months. It is pretty terrible. The sheer quantity of costumes in this, and in Dead or Alive 5, is kind of crazy, and it does show us that it pretty much is worth their time to have a bunch of artists sit down and just pump out costume after costume. Do you want this character with melted chocolate on them? Bam, you can get it. So often, with videos like this, we end up talking about it in terms of industry trends. And I actually think that's somewhat less the case here, but it's a very interesting topic. So I think that this is a bit isolated to the Dead or Alive franchise, but admittedly, it does also compound with publishers generally struggling to monetize fighting games. More than any other games, fighting games have had an insane number of re-releases, DLC characters, season passes, costume packs, and all that stuff. But that said, I do think a part of this is Koei Tecmo being a bit incompetent. What I'm saying here is that the villain that is twirling their mustache is very obvious, but the villain that is subtle and sneaky is not. Because if you took every paid skin in a weekly store like on Anthem or Fortnite, and you tallied the cost of purchasing them all, and you strung it out over a quarter, you would likely come up with something significantly more expensive than this season pass, and in some cases with significantly more randomness through loot boxes. Fortnite's free to play, but I think the comparison still holds. The Western companies seem to be cramming a lot of this stuff into their games, but they're just doing it in a more subtle way. Okay, it's still as subtle as a thrown brick, but it's highly obfuscated, meaning that it's harder to see the complete picture of the monetization. With Dead or Alive, they're telling you exactly what is going on straight up. And that's why it seems so absurd. Saying that Dead or Alive 5 has a maximum price of £1,000 is fine, but when you look at Fortnite with full MTX engagement over a year or two, I imagine it's actually going to be quite a bit more. Now, once again, it's free to play versus buy to play, but when we're talking about total costs tallying over £1,000, I think the initial buy-in of 45 is somewhat just a little bit less important as a consideration. We're only going to see more of this though, fully priced games with free-to-play levels of microtransactions. What Dead or Alive 6 has done seems absurd, but it evokes that strong emotional response because it is so upfront about it. The real takeaway from this video is that most of the publishers are doing something highly similar to this. Most of them, though, are just better at hiding it. And indeed, some of them are using things like limited availability weekly stores, which guess what? That is actually using fear of missing out as an emotional manipulator to get more sales. They're using things like the old, and this is something I covered in the other video of today, the old prismatic matrix thing from Destiny, where, you know what? That was just a gambling system. I mean, not technically gambling because you can't cash out, but still, they were giving you a free token to get one of 10 things. They knew that that token would then knock out the item that you got, meaning that the chances of you spending further tokens to get the item you wanted, because there's bad luck protection, there's no dupes, a lot of that stuff actually feels a little bit more evil. It's just the Koei Tecmo were so upfront about what they were doing that everyone turns around and gets the headline, $93 season pass, when in actuality, a lot of other companies with buy-to-play games are doing things that are a bit more manipulative. So there you go, that's my take on this. If you want to check out the other video on this channel, including a pretty deep dive on the monetization and the upcoming content, then you can take a look at what Destiny looks like now that it is free from Activision and how that could possibly go. So thank you very much for watching this video, and with that, I will see you next time.